Hey guys, it's Mike here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Jessica Jones Season 2, which is the newest entry into the Marvel series on Netflix. Now, I didn't have the opportunity to review the first season when it came out, however, I thought it was great, and was the second best of the Marvel series just behind Daredevil. So as a result, Season 2 has a lot to live up to. So is Jessica Jones Season 2 as good as the first season? Or does it fall short of that standard? Well, in this review, I'm going to break that down. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and enable notifications so you can see all of my content right away when it comes out. Now in this video, I'm going to have spoilers for the season, as a show like this can be difficult to really discuss without getting into spoilers, so if you want to watch the season, I'd suggest doing so and then coming back to this review. But otherwise, let's get into this review. Now the story of Jessica Jones Season 2 takes place a little while after The Defenders, which saw Jessica team up with Daredevil, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist to fight against the Hand. However, this season features a more personal story focusing on Jessica's past, and particularly her mission to discover who is behind the secretive IGH, who experimented on her after the fatal car crash where she was seemingly the only survivor. However, as Jessica learns more about IGH, the story begins to hit closer to home than she could have ever imagined, as she discovers that her mother also survived the car crash and was experimented on. And like Jessica, these experiments granted her mother superhuman abilities. However, they also had the serious side effect of affecting her mind and filling her with a rage that led to the deaths of many people, including some people that Jessica knew closely. And throughout the season, Jessica must figure out what she must do with her mother, whether she can allow her to continue doing what she is doing, and all the while reflecting on who she is herself. Is Jessica Jones a killer, someone who is deep down a bad person, and simply can't stop after ending Kilgrave's life in the finale of the last season? Is her anger and personality the result of these experiments, or can she control herself and truly be a good person? And this is really the driving force of the season, as well as a look inside the minds of Jessica, her mother, and those around them. And this is what makes Season 2 and Jessica Jones as a series particularly interesting. This is a series that isn't afraid to get into the real depths of its characters' minds, even if those depths are dark and twisted. And that is something that the Netflix platform, with far less restrictions than normal television, allows this and other Marvel series to excel at. This season, for instance, is 13 episodes long, with most of the episodes nearly an hour in length. And while a series like The Punisher felt too stretched at this length, Jessica Jones is something that can benefit from more episodes because of how much is happening in the season. Although perhaps a little bit too much is happening this season, but I'll get into that a little later. Now let's get into the acting. Kristen Ritter reprises her role as Jessica Jones in this season, and as always, she's great. Although I originally saw her as Jane from Breaking Bad, her performance in the Marvel series is so befitting of this character that when I see her in these scenes, I'm seeing Jessica Jones. You can really see the struggles that she is going through throughout her story, and how tormented she is by her own past, as well as the question of if she is a killer in the wake of the end of last season. And in this season, she gets in a perhaps even more messed up situation, and does even worse things than she did in the last. However, through it all, you can empathize with her character, understand why she is making many of these decisions, even if you can see them as mistakes, and when she inevitably goes off the deep end, you can feel for her the whole way through it. Janet McTeer plays Jessica's mother, Alyssa Jones, and her performance and relationship with Jessica is a driving force behind this season. This is a woman who is full of rage that at times is beyond her control, and her superhuman strength and reflexes only make this a bigger problem. The story of how she became who she is at this point in the series, and what she went through is tragic, and even though she wanted to, she wasn't able to be with her daughter because of her own issues. You empathize with what she went through, and you can see that she and Jessica have a real connection that only family, and in this case a mother and daughter, can have. And Jessica's time she spends with Alyssa is the closest thing she sees to having a normal life. But the situation is abnormal, and Jessica's mother is a real threat. And thus Jessica must make the difficult decision of whether she can allow her mother to continue hurting people, or if she must put a stop to it herself. And this aspect of the season for me is its strongest point. Seeing their characters fleshed out, seeing Alyssa's backstory leading up to this season, and realizing what decision Jessica may inevitably have to make is enthralling and makes for some good television. However, I feel that some of the other aspects of the story weren't really as strong as this. And one of the reasons behind this could be that there were far too many subplots that happened in this season, and at times they took away too much of the focus from the main story. In this season alone, we had the story of Jessica searching out IGH and what happens between her and her mother. Rachel Taylor also returns as Trish Walker and has her own subplot where she is also searching for IGH, and then we find out she's being stalked by Simpson, and then she has a story involving his inhaler and her falling off the wagon with substances, and then quitting her job, and then eventually trying to use IGH to her own benefit because she also wants powers like Jessica. And Taylor does a good job with the character and what she's given, but this really could have been its own season instead of being in this one. We also have a subplot involving Malcolm, who is once again played by Ika Darville, and he becomes an associate at Jessica's private eye business called Alias, which is the name of the comic series the show is based on. And then he ends up having issues with Jessica and tries to work for Jerry Hogarth, played by Carrie Ann Moss, who also has her own subplot involving her dying from a terminal illness, which then leads to her having a relationship with a nurse from IGH who is also connected to another person who was supposedly experimented on. And on top of this, Jessica starts having a relationship with her apartment building super, and has to help him out with his family issues, including an ex-wife who tries to kidnap their son. There's just way too much going on in this season, and I'm not entirely sure why they felt the need to do so much. Perhaps the showrunners felt they needed all of these subplots to fill a 13-episode runtime, but if that's the case, they should have cut down the episode number like they did with The Defenders, and we would have a more focused series. Perhaps it was to showcase Jessica's way of living more of a normal life, or wanting to give other characters more to do, but ultimately the season almost feels like it's crammed with 2 seasons worth of content. And honestly, I wasn't the biggest fan of how some of them ended, such as Hogarth's subplot, which had a twist that felt like it came out of nowhere and wasn't really executed as well as it could have been. And honestly, I thought this season was really missing the presence of Kilgrave. David Tennant was perhaps the best part of season 1, and was great in his role as the manipulative, twisted, superpowered Kilgrave. And that season really had a great central villain and constant looming threat. And while Kilgrave does make a sort of appearance in this season, and the impact of last season could be felt throughout, the series just felt poorer for him not being around. And I don't feel like the stories told in this season were as focused or as compelling to me as what we saw with Kilgrave. And this lack of his character was especially made apparent to me during the point of the season where we do see him again, which was great, but only while it lasted. And I also don't know if I liked how the season ended. I understand what the season was building to, and that it would likely end with some finality, but how the ending went down also felt a little unsatisfying, with Trish making the decision for Jessica, and then their friendship basically being done for. A lot of it felt like set up for another season, but wasn't handled as well as last season's. And some of what was set up last season, like Simpson and Kozlov, or Hogarth and her fiance, didn't really have much, if any, payoff. So overall, I liked Jessica Jones Season 2. It had some strong dynamics with Jessica, her mother, and where this series best excels at is exploring the relationships with the characters, and how Jessica really fits into the world with these other people. However, this season is dragged down at points by far too many subplots, which can affect the pacing, distract from the main story, and some of them don't have the most satisfying conclusions. So while I like this season, I don't think it was quite as good as Season 1. In terms of a rating, I would give Season 1 about an 8 to a 9, but for Season 2, I think I'm going to settle on a 7 out of 10. So what did you guys think of Jessica Jones Season 2? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you like this content, then stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yes, and you'd better subscribe and enable those notifications.